Hey everyone, Jamie here from technicalcafe.com. Welcome to your 16th HTML tutorial. In the previous tutorial we talked about how to create HTML forms, and the example we used there was a login form where users could enter in their username, password, and then click on the login button. So the example that we're going to be using today is a little bit different. It's a registration form, and I just created a example one. So what this is going to contain is it's going to contain a fields for a username, a password, and then we're going to add in two options, which are gender, using radio buttons here so the user can only pick one option, and favorite food. And it's going to allow the user to click as many as apply. So the username and password fields that we have here, as well as the register button, are pretty similar to what we were working on in the last tutorial. So if you haven't seen that, you can just check out the last tutorial. Then we'll go over it again in this one as well. So these right here are called radio buttons, and these only allow you to select one or the other. So you can't be both male and female here. So it allows you to pick only one, and these right here for the favorite food are checkboxes, and I'm sure you've seen these all over the internet somewhere. So these allow you to pick as many as you want. So let's say you like fruit, and you like salad, and you like a cheeseburger as well, but you don't like ice cream or pizza. It allows you to select just those ones, or you can select all if you like it all, or if you don't like any, though some of these things on here are pretty good, you can just unselect all of them. And when you click register, like we also talked about in the last tutorial, it'll bring you to a process.php page where the values contained within these elements here are all passed to a different page to be dealt with, either entered into a database or whatever the programmer chose to do. So let's take a look at the code over here. So here we have it. This is the code that we're going to be using for this tutorial here. It just involves a lot of input type. So let's clear this out and we'll get to work on it here. So delete everything here. So this is our page here. We still have the title creating HTML forms, similar to last time. So let's go about creating our form. First we're going to create a little bit of a header. We'll use H3, and if you remember from that tutorial that it's somewhere in the middle of the headers, with H6 being the smallest and H1 being the largest. So we'll say creating HTML forms, and we'll save that. Come over here and take a look, and here's our nice title on our page here. So let's come down and we'll work on creating our form. So the first thing we're going to say is please register below, and because this is going to be a registration form as opposed to a login form. So if we'll save, come over and take a look, and notice we have our basic stuff set up here. So let's go about making the actual form itself. So we'll say form, and then we'll create a closing form tag, and in between these two tags, if you remember, all the form elements are going to go. So the first element we're going to have is a username element. So we'll say input type equals, and if you remember from last tutorial as well, for a text box all you need to do is enter in text, and it's going to basically tell the browser that there's a text input here. So we'll give this a name as well, and we're going to call this username. And this name right here, is, if you'll remember, is what's passed on to the other script, so it's going to be passed on to our process.php, which we'll enter in a second. And we'll do the same for the password field. So input type equals password, name equals password, and we'll close that off there. If you'll notice that these two right here, the input boxes, do not need a closing tag, so they don't need a input closing, but it's just kind of a good thing to do if you add in the slash here. I believe it's not required, but it's just kind of a good practice to get into, I guess. So right here what we have is our two input boxes. We'll save that, come over here and take a look. You'll notice that they're right next to each other, and one is a name input or text box, and the other is a password box. So let's go ahead and add some text so the users know what they're actually entering in. So we'll say username, and then we'll put a colon and a space, and for the password colon space, and we'll save that. So what we're going to do now is for a registration form, I kind of want the things to be in line with another, so one after another. So we'll use, instead of a BR spacing, which I think kind of leaves them a little close together and it's kind of hard to differentiate between the two, we're going to use a paragraph break. So in order to do that, we'll just create some paragraph tags and just leave it empty, and that'll give us a space like you would have in a regular paragraph. So here's our username box and our password box. So now let's go about adding our radio buttons. And in order to do that, we're going to actually add another paragraph space, and we'll say gender. So if we save this, come along and refresh, you'll notice that now we have a section for the users to enter in their gender. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to create a radio button. So what we're going to do is we're going to say input type equals, so it's the same as entering a text box or a button, and the type that we're going to be using is going to be radio. So when we save this, come over here and take a look, you'll notice that we have this stray radio button. Kind of looks like an eye or something. So if we just refresh here to get rid of that, and we're going to enter in another one. So input type equals radio. So if we save, forgot the closer there. If we save, we'll have two radio buttons, and you'll notice right now that they can both be clicked, and it kind of looks like a set of two eyes, but they can both be clicked because we haven't yet altered the name element within, or the name attribute within the input element. So what we're going to do is we're going to be saying name equals, we'll give it to both of them here, and where the name equals, you have to have the same name so long as you want the two options to not be able to be chosen at the same time. So for example, let's just format this real quick. We'll say male, and then underneath we'll say female. So we'll save that, put a space in between using, I think we'll use a BR for this, and we'll save, and we have our male and female options. We're going to space it out up here too. Okay, so now we have our gender option. We can choose male or female here, but you'll notice that they're both selected, and you can't be both. So let's just come over here and take a look here. So in order to change that, we got to give them the same name. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to say we'll say gender, and then we'll say gender. So when we save this and come over here and refresh, you'll notice that now we can only choose one because they have the same name. So this works good if you want to have only one option can be chosen, and if you're going to have more than one radio box, set of radio boxes throughout it. Let's say you want one for age, and you want to be able to let them choose the age group that they're in, and they can only choose one, obviously. So it's good to just have some radio buttons in there, and just make sure you give it a different name than the gender one. So let's just come over here and continue working on this. So now that we have our radio buttons working, we're going to put another paragraph space, and then we're going to add our favorite food. And we'll say in parentheses, check all that apply. So we'll save that, come over here and take a look, and here we go. So let's just come over here, going to add a quick colon in there, make it look a little better, and we'll give a quick paragraph break. Okay, so for over here, we're going to be adding in checkboxes, and as you saw in the beginning of this tutorial, the checkboxes, they can all be checked if they want, or you can use none of them. So it's kind of whatever the user chooses. So for this, what we're going to do is we're going to just say input type equals, and the input type for checkbox is just checkbox. So if we save that, come over here and refresh, you'll notice that now we have a checkbox that we can check and uncheck, unlike the radio button where once you click on it, you can't get rid of it no matter where you click. So let's come in here and we'll give the checkbox a name attribute. And for this one, we're going to call this salad. We'll call it fruit, actually. I think that's what I did in the original here. So we'll give that a name, and we'll say fruit, and we'll save that. And now we have the option of fruit. So let's just continue on adding some more in here. Remember, we say input type equals checkbox, and remember to have the quotation marks here. It might not be as important in HTML as it is in other languages like JavaScript or Java, PHP, so it's just a kind of a good practice to get into, especially if you're interested in learning other languages in the future. So name, we'll give this, we'll say salad now. Figure maybe we can put the healthy options up top. And we'll save, come over here and refresh. And you'll notice that we have fruit and salad, and they can both be checked at the same time, not checked, one or the other. So I'm going to actually put a space in between them. Okay, here we go. So fruit and salad, those are good. So let's add a couple more options here, and we'll just copy and paste this to avoid having to type it. So we're going to have the input type equals checkbox, and for this one we'll say pizza. And then we'll keep adding some more in here. Just paste it back in and change the name attributes to cheeseburger. And then we'll save and refresh, and come over here, and you'll notice that now we have our checkboxes for our favorite foods here. And what the, if you remember from the previous tutorial, what these do, the name elements, or attributes rather, is what they send whatever the user typed in or entered to the PHP page, or whatever other page you're using. So if you remember last time in ours, I forgot to actually enter this in here, we had an action associated with our form, and what the action does is it tells the browser basically where to send the information. So depending on what you're doing, if you're setting up like a registration form, you might want to call the action register or register process.php or something like that. So we'll just call this process.php just to keep it simple. And then you have a method, and the method is how you're going to send the data. So if you use a get method, what happens is the data, you'll end up seeing it get sent over here, and you can you'll actually see the variable names and the data that's stored in those variables up here in the address bar. So that's probably not what you want if you're going to be sending sensitive data like credit card numbers, passwords, stuff like that. So for that, you'd probably use a post and somehow maybe encrypt it. So let's just come over here and we will set this equal to post. And then for over here, we're going to create our final option in the form here. And we're going to call this, let's say, ice cream. And when you're using a name attribute, it's important that don't leave a space in between it, because in other programming languages, I'm not sure so much about doing this in HTML, but in other programming languages, if you're declaring variables, you're not going to want to use a space. You're going to either want to use an underscore, or you're going to want to either capitalize the second word. So for this, we'll just say ice underscore cream, and we're going to say ice cream. Come over here and refresh, and here's our 5 options that we're going to be having for this registration form. So the last thing you're going to need to add for this form is a submit button, so that the user can actually tell the browser, you know, I'm ready to send this over. So we're going to do some paragraph spacing there, and we're going to say input type equals name equals value equals. And so for this option, we're going to have actually 3 options here, or 3 attributes within this element. So the type that we're going to be using is a submit. In this, we're going to be creating a submit button. The name, we'll just call it submit. So when it gets over to the other page, maybe we want to say don't let the user come to this page unless the submit button's been clicked. And the value, we're going to call it, let me just show you what it looks like without the value. Without a value, you'll have just an empty button that brings you to the process.php page. So if we take this off completely, you'll notice that we just have a submit query button. So we're going to add a value that says register. So we'll come over here and refresh, and here's our completed form. We'll just erase that here. So you'll notice that our text box here allows us to enter in our name. Our password box lets us enter in our password without it being shown in case there's someone behind us or looking at our computer or whatnot. The gender box allows you to choose either one or the other because we have the same name associated with it. If we called this one, let's say male, we'll say MOF for male or female. We come over here and refresh, you'll notice that we can actually choose both, and that's not something that we're going to typically want, so we'll just call it gender again. So we can now only choose one or the other, and for the checkboxes we can choose as many as we want, or as little as we want, depending on what we're choosing here. So once we enter in our username and password and everything, select what we like, and click register, the data will all be sent to the process.php page because we're using our, because we're using our action process.php. And now this can differ depending on what you're doing in our method post. Just to show you what get does, if we say method is get, and we come back over here and refresh, we'll enter in our username here, we'll say Jamie, password, we'll say password, we'll say male, and we'll say I like pizza, and we click register. You'll notice that all of our variable names, or the names that we associated with these, are being sent right up here in the address bar, which isn't something that we're going to typically want, especially when we're sending passwords. Other things that's okay for, maybe if you're doing a search engine or something, but for this, that's typically not something that you're going to want. And one last thing before we run out of time here, if you want to, you can actually indent all this stuff here. In Notepad++, you can just highlight and hit Tab. That way you have a little bit more of a like a feel of what's what, so you know where the form starts, where the form ends, and you can just leave all the elements within the form in the middle. That's just a little tip here if you want to use that. So thank you for watching this tutorial. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to leave them below or send me an email using the Technical Cafe comment page. Additionally, please feel free to subscribe if you like these tutorials. Feel free to suggest tutorials that you'd like to see. And you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/jamiemcg. And if for technical updates or whatnot, you can follow the Technical Cafe Twitter. And lastly, the Technical Cafe blog, where you can read tech news, tips, tricks, stuff like that. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.